I'm a native French speaker from Canada, but I have a very pronounced Acadian/kayak accent. For those who don't know, it's pretty much a mix of French and English with some local dialect thrown in there. Pretty common in the Maritimes, where I still live. I'm perfectly bilingual in both languages. I started dating my boyfriend, who only speaks English, about 4 years ago and spent a lot of time with his family. They've all been really great, except for one of his aunts. She says she was a French teacher in Anglophone schools for over 40 years up until a year ago and even studied in France. And she insists on only talking to me in French. I agreed at first since I didn't want to be rude to his family, but it's getting super weird. I don't understand how she was able to teach kids English or how she comes up with most of her sentence. Like I have to guess 90% of whatever she says and hope I'm right because it makes absolutely no sense. Example, she said a la citrouille la tarte va bien dans ma bouche, which roughly translates to the pumpkin a pie goes well in my mouth. When she meant this pumpkin pie tastes delicious, she constantly criticizes my accent and tries to correct my pronunciation of certain words, and tells me I need to pick a language. When I accidentally say something in kayak, speaking proper Francais standard is actually getting harder for me since I've been only studying / working in English. So last night during dinner she started going on about how Acadians were uneducated and made no effort to properly learn a language, which is total BS, and obviously weirdly directed at me. For the rest of the night I stopped guessing what she was trying to say to me in French, acting like I didn't understand anything, and started correcting her as well, which was pretty much every single sentence she said. I wasn't trying to be rude or aggressive about it, but after a while she gave up on the French and ignored me for the rest of the night. Turns out she was super pissed and told everyone I was trying to embarrass her in front of everyone. Looking back, I think I might have taken it too far by not stopping after 2 to 3 sentences, and I feel bad. My boyfriend said I was being while his mom said she probably deserved it. Forgot to mention that I told her a few years ago that it's hard for me to fully speak proper French as I spoke kayak all my life. Tried to explain Acadian culture, she wasn't having it, surprise, and she stopped for a while but is now doing it again. I am a 37 years old male. I have a 13-year-old son. I was a widower when I met my now wife. She has a 16-year-old daughter from another relationship. The family is often on pretty good terms. My son is the quiet one in the house. He keeps to himself a lot but not to the point of being concerning. My wife and stepdaughter are the complete opposite. They both encourage him to be outgoing and share activities and join gatherings with extended family. My son complained about having to be forced out of his comfort zone and having his need for space invalidated. I spoke to both my wife and stepdaughter and asked them to give him space and freedom to spend his time however he wanted. They apologized and promised to let him be. As Mother's Day was approaching, I wanted to throw my wife a surprise Mother's Day celebration. It was no longer a surprise because my stepdaughter gave her the heads so she could prepare. Yesterday I got off work earlier than usual to get final arrangements done. We planned to celebrate at the restaurant and invited her family there. I had the key, and while I was entering the house through the front door I overheard my wife and stepdaughter talking to my son. My wife was asking my son if he could convince me to let him stay home and not go with them to the restaurant to celebrate. I paused and decided to keep listening. My son said why, and she told him that his introverted and socially inept attitude will make her family uncomfortable and will ruin the mood. He promised her that he'd be well behaved and would try to interact and socialize with everyone, but she said that she wasn't buying it. He kept reassuring her, but she snapped and told him that technically she's not his mom, so she didn't get why he wanted to celebrate Mother's Day with her so badly. My stepdaughter threw some, I don't remember, backhanded comment, and then both of them were shocked to see me standing there. Both were staring without saying anything. I told my son and his stepsister to go to their rooms, then told my wife that the celebration was off, cancelled. She tried to argue, asking why repeatedly, and I told her why. She tried to explain that she didn't mean it like that and that I only heard part of the conversation but not all of it. I told her I was done arguing and the decision was already made. She yelled, asking what she was going to tell her family, and said that I was making tremendous mistake towards her. I ignored her while she kept throwing tantrum after a tantrum. Early this morning she took my stepdaughter and went to stay with her folks. Not a single call or text from her so far. Situation is full of tension. I'm upset still, but more hurt to be honest. I mean, yes, I did say I was going to have this celebration, but I thought that what she said to my son was too harsh to ignore. I used to work on a small team for a division of a multinational company. We used to primarily be staffed by what were called old-timers. Basically people who were close to being of a pensionable age who didn't want the hustle. That culture shifted and a lot of young blood has been brought in. I formerly worked there and was given a lateral move out. A colleague, Tina, still works there. Recently an opening for director came up and Tina came to me for help. She's been doing overtime and working hard to get noticed for this position. She's well qualified for it and has extensive experience at the company, so she was given a chance to interview for it. Tina is a single mother who has overcome poverty in childhood, racists / bigots in the industry, and worked hard to support her kids. She's had health issues but always fought hard. Tina is tenacious and hardworking, but there are issues. She struggles in some areas, and while she'd definitely make a great director as she's contentious, kind and courteous, the role is evolving and may be a bit of a stretch. Nonetheless, I helped her with her application and presentation. Beyond being colleagues, she and I are friends. We spend a lot of time outside of work together. We're the only women of color in our respective areas, and share a lot of our deep feelings and thoughts. She worked hard and put together a good presentation. I was really proud of her. She presented this morning at 9:30 and got through it and was out by 10 o'clock. Most of the other applicants were internal and interviewed yesterday, but one person was recommended by a senior VP in a different department. The guy who was recommended is a 30-year-old hotshot. I think he may actually be in his late 20s. He will soon graduate from an Ivy League MBA and is the definition of corporate style. They gave him a last-minute presentation slot immediately following Tina. I attended all of the presentations. I am not on the hiring committee, but was there to support Tina and see how the presentations went. When the hotshot gave his presentation, it wasn't even close. The 20 of us sat in the room and were dumbfounded. Not only was his presentation visually appealing, but he noticed details none of us ever did, and he developed a pitch that was so innovative that our AVP asked to use a tagline he created. His technical analysis was so spot on that it was spooky. He understood issues facing our business unit without having to be told and had ready solutions to solve the problems. Questions they asked him were more about how he'll do things when he takes over the role. It was made very clear to him that this was his job, and they even provided an unofficial tentative start date. It is very clear that he understands the industry and his past experiences, such as professional work experience as well as winning top case competitions and academic awards, prepared him very well. The presentations were in totally different leagues. After he finished, he made a self-deprecating joke and took questions. He thanked us and left. We all sat there for a minute chatting when the AVP very loudly told the HR director to offer significantly above the salary and hammer out a start date immediately and get a contract signed. The VP who recommended him knew him from the MBA program, as the VP is a case coach there. He said he'd be his reference, and they are skipping all the formalities and going right to the offer. Tina has no idea. She was so happy with her performance, and she's sure she nailed it. She did well, about as well as the other candidates, but this guy is out and out in a different league. Just based on that, I too would hire the other guy. She's sitting on cloud 9 at her desk and planning a celebratory dinner to celebrate her performance. She was told decisions would be made in a couple of weeks. At this rate, it's likely she'll be informed that she didn't get the job well before 5 p.m. I really don't know what to do or say. If she asks, should I be honest about this guy's presentation? Should I avoid her the rest of the day? I want to support her, but have no idea how to even begin talking to her. I have waited tables for the last 3 years. During my shift last night, a group of 4 women in their late 20s came in. They were a pleasure to have as customers. They ordered 4 of our house cocktails to start with and then went over the menu for their entrees. Then I was on my way back to their booth with the drinks on a tray. I walked by the back side and overheard one of them talking about how she was 14 weeks along. When I rounded back, they were talking about the same topic and it was clear to me that she was pregnant. I figured her having one drink wasn't a big deal. They ordered their entrees and I went off to handle other tables. About 5 minutes later, they called me over again and asked for another round. At this point I started getting concerned, but I took the order and cheerfully said I'd be right back. This time, I went to the bartender and asked him to make one of them a virgin cocktail. He was confused, but since he's a good friend of mine, I told him to just trust me. A few cocktails later, her strictly virgin, they started getting rowdy, and Mrs. Pregnant Woman was also getting into it. I figured that since she didn't notice, things were okay. The problem came when I took them their check, and they asked to split the bill at the register. When Mrs. Pregnant Woman got to the counter, I saw her cocktails were marked with virgin. My bartender had edited each in the system for inventory. It was too late for me to edit them back, so I just had her pay, hoping that she wouldn't look at the receipt. They all thanked me and left, leaving a generous tip in the process. They were talking in the parking lot for the next short while, presumably waiting for an Uber. Several minutes later, Mrs. Pregnant Woman came back and asked what virgin on the receipt meant. I fessed up that it meant non-alcoholic. She blank stared me for a few seconds and then asked if she had ordered a non-alcoholic cocktail. I said no, but told her that I assumed she wanted one seeing as she was pregnant. It was a lame lie and I'll admit it, but she looked me in the eye and asked me to return her part of the tip. I did so. Then she talked to my manager. My manager took me into her office and literally shrieked at me until hoarse. I stood my ground and told her that I'm not going to be responsible for FAS. She told me that she was taking me off the calendar until she decided what to do with me. She also informed me that I could get the restaurant in serious trouble for discrimination. And upon examination of my state's laws, she is correct. But when I talked to my mother and father about it tonight, they told me that they understood my position. The entire staff at the restaurant is against me and I think that I'm going to call in and tell my manager that I quit. But I still feel in the right here.